Today, the S&P 500 closed at a record high, just 2 days after the current bull market in stocks became the longest in history. The Nasdaq Composite and the Russell 2000 indexes also closed at all-time highs. However, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is still below the high it set in January. So now, I'm looking for a sign of where the market is headed. A sign of any kind. Which way is the market headed? Just give me a sign. Which way? Let's take a look. Today we're going to look at all three indexes, beginning with the Nasdaq, and we're going to stay with the 2-year weekly chart on each. And this, beginning with the Nasdaq, shows the correction earlier this year, and then the move up, and then we continued on up in a relatively decent direction. Looking at the MACD, you can see the same thing. The bottom here earlier this year, fast line going over the slow line and continuing on up. We've had a hiccup in the last week or two, but it looks like the fast line is reflecting off, and then it looks like it's going to continue and hopefully accelerate into the next few months or so. MACD shows much the same, not as well. The price rate of change, the fast line did come through here, but I expect that to reflect and then head back on up. Relative strength looks good, continuing on up from that bottom earlier in 2018. Stochastics were on the high end of the arc here. However, fast line reflecting off and looks like it's going to accelerate up a little bit. Volume looks fine, and then the Williams looks very good as well, already heading on up. Back to the price chart. Again, this is the Nasdaq 2-year weekly. Everything looks good. So now let's go take a look at the S&P 500. This is the S&P 500 by the spiders, the SPY, and it looks like we just got that record by a few points, but a record nonetheless. And again, here's the correction, and then the move up. A little bit of hesitation at this point here, but then a continuation up through there. Let's go look at the MACD. The MACD looked very healthy with the correction, the move on up, and then we had that hesitation here, but since then, the fast line reflected off the slow line and has continued to accelerate, and I expect that will also continue. This is also shown in the MACD histogram. That looks good. Into the price rate of change, we do have a little bit of a downward trajectory, but I think that is going to reflect off of the slow line there and head on up. Also, relative strength looks very good. This is very nice, except for, of course, that little hiccup right in this area, but I think we've solved that and we're on our way. Stochastics also looks very good. We're heading toward the top of the arc, but things are still accelerating on the upside, so that looks nice and healthy. Volume looks fine, and then, of course, the Williams, like in the Nasdaq, continuing on up, very healthy. Moving back up to the price chart, I think we're going to hold this record and continue. So now let's go to the Dow Jones Industrial Average. This is the Dow Jones Industrial Average looking through the diamonds. And like the other two indexes, things are continuing to head up. Here was the correction earlier this year, but the whole thing is doing a nice dish. Everything looks good. We have not hit a record since early in 2018, but we're going to be approaching that. So the Dow is behind both the Nasdaq and the S&P, but I think it is going to do just fine here in the near future, as can be seen through the MACD. Looks like we had this hesitation and then reflection down, but it looked like it hit that bottom and then went on through, moved on through that slow line, and now looks like it's going to start accelerating. And so this is kind of the beginning of a good move upward, in my opinion, shown by the histogram as well, continuing on up into the price rate of change. We've seen this sort of downturn in the other indices, but I think that's just going to reflect on up here in the near future, and that's shown by the relative strength, which is very healthy, continuing on up. The stochastics, you can see that we're not quite as mature as the stochastic in the S&P or in the NASDAQ, but I think those two indices are going to tell us that the the Dow here, stochastic, is going to continue on up and hit toward the top arc, but that's going to take some time. So I think things are going to continue to move on up. Looks very healthy, and the volume seems to be fine. And then Williams, again, like the other two, very strong, very healthy, moving on up. Back up to the price chart. The Dow is behind the other two indices, but kind of like Dow theory, in my opinion, the Dow is going to head toward a record and confirm the two records by the S&P and the NASDAQ. So overall, the market looks very healthy to continue in upward direction. So for today, that's ChewDog Charts. Thank you.